Our text for today brings us to the second half of our story from last week. Jesus had asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter had said, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus told him that understanding came from God, not from mankind. And then he told the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Now, beginning in verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." It was a fundraising dinner, and it was time for the offering. He came to the podium, gripped both sides, leaned into the microphone, and said, "Dig deep." And then he left and went and sat down. It was not what we had expected. It was an example to me of a time when someone was trying to be strong and instead came off as being tough, trying to be committed to a cause that we had all been invited to in this room, and came off as callous and distant. I'm pretty sure it was the smallest fundraiser of all the fundraisers we had had. And it became something for the group of us who had surrounded him that day as a sort of a calling card. "Oh, we're having an offering? Tell them to dig deep." And then we would do anything but that. Because he wasn't strong. He was tough. And his imperative wasn't an invitation. It came off almost as a threat. On the other hand, I got to enjoy one of my heroes this weekend as I watched Michigan State's football game on Friday night. Tom Izzo came into the broadcast booth. He is one of my heroes, somebody who I've known for most of my life and somebody who I think highly of. He has a history that is sometimes used against him. He is demanding. He can be pretty loud enough that by the end of the season, he barely has a voice left. One of the better impressions I do, late season Tom Izzo. He has very high standards, and people recruit against him by saying he's tough. You don't want your kid to go there because he's just going to yell at him. But as I've watched him and gotten to know him a little bit over time, is he tough or is he indeed strong? Our first Sunday together here will always be interlinked with the shootings at Michigan State University. You let me stand here and tell you how broken I was. And then you dared to ask me to come back. And now next week, we will make commitments to each other about the relationship that we are building here in this place. On campus, they had a gathering. A gathering because they didn't know what else to do. So let's be together. And the number one thing that they needed was for Coach Izzo to stand in front of them and tell them how broken he was. This man, who some describe as tough, runs very deep. And he stood in front of them with tears in his eyes, wept with them, spoke of the violation of that campus and that place and their lives. And he was oh so strong. He may be loud, but all his players come back. He may be demanding, but all of them stand behind him. Several of them have given and given greatly. This year, of all things, Michigan State dedicated a new football building, not a basketball building, but a football building through donations from an alum who only asked that it be dedicated in Coach Izzo's name. Because, as he said on TV on Friday, that's actually his favorite sport. They come back and they give and they share, and he calls them to the high standards that he asked of them on the court, off the court as well. He had a moment on Friday night as he sat next to Spencer Tillman, the commentator for the day, and he turned to him and he called him Solomon. And he felt awful because he had made a mistake. He had called someone named Spencer Solomon, and he ruminated on it because it was his name and it was precious. And Spencer Tillman didn't care, but Coach Izzo did. It was important to him. He'd shake his head all over again now if he was here with us today. My favorite moments with Coach are in the handshake lines after games. He stops players from other teams, and he tells them what they mean to him. He coaches them in those moments, not just as players, but as people, as young men. He coaches them. He encourages them. And he spends incredibly long amounts of time shaking the hands of other coaches, particularly younger coaches. He coaches them. He encourages them. He loves them. Jesus, most likely the strongest person who ever walked the earth. Jesus, a person who felt deeply, who wept, who was enraged, who laughed, who stepped away to be rejuvenated and revitalized, and who came back to share, to serve, to teach, to coach, to love. I don't talk about Coach Izzo and Jesus side by side, and he would be mortified to think that I did. But because I can access where he lives, where he functions, I understand Tom Izzo, and I'm still learning to understand Jesus. Last week, as I mentioned, who do you say that I am? And Peter said, the Messiah. And Jesus said, only God could tell you that, but you are a rock. And it is on this rock that I will build, and you will be a part of that rock here on earth. Now today, Peter has a different idea. Human thoughts about protection, about rejection. Don't say that, Jesus. It is a thought that is more tough than strong, more about an outer facade than an inner richness. And Jesus' response is to say, you are a rock, and today you are a stumbling block. Get behind me. You and these thoughts, get behind me. Leave this. I believe that tough versus strong is a key issue in the world these days. It's not new, but in the particular world that we live in now, it is amplified. We are, as a culture, celebrating tough, celebrating being angry, being divisive, being demeaning, being profane. That may leap to politics in your mind, and it is not a political statement. It is just as much these days about the rhetoric of the UAW as it is about MAGA. It is just as much about the pontificating on MSNBC as it is on Fox. Just as much U of M as it is MSU, and so on. But being tough is not being strong. They are not the same, and sometimes being tough gets in the way of being truly strong. Peter and the disciples learned that and continued to learn that, and so can we. Jesus points instead to sacrificial love, giving of ourselves for others, and then doesn't just point to it, but lives it out, a sacrificial love that we remember, that we commemorate, that we share, and that we even dare to celebrate as we come to the table today. This is my body. This is my blood. But Jesus lived out that love and that sacrificial love, not just in death, but in life, as a giver, as a teacher, as a caregiver, as an inspiration, and as a corrector at times, to Peter as much as anyone. So what are we to do? What are we to do? Well, the answer is a four-letter word. Not the profane four-letter words that I was talking about in terms of being tough, but the key word to being strong is love. The giving and receiving of love, the willingness to be a part of those transactions and equations in the world. In fact, Simon Sinek says, asking for help is in itself an act of service. Don't deny the people who love you the honor of being there to support you. And when are we called to give? Well, let's look at Romans. As Dave beautifully offered to us today. Eugene Peterson calls this text an arpeggio of 29 imperatives that run up and down the scale of love. Isn't that beautiful? An arpeggio that run up and down the scale of love. Several commentators I looked at called it staccato. Bang, 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 one thing after another, and here they are. Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor, do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony with one another, and do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. And then it gets potentially a little confusing. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Jennifer Hurt from the Yale Divinity School says this about verses 20 and 21. Of course, it is saying you're feeding them, right? You're giving them drinks. So, of course, you are doing something good for your enemy. But I do think it feels out of place. It feels somehow manipulative. It feels mean. You're only doing this to make them feel bad about themselves somehow. But I think, she says, we may misinterpret this passage. If we think back to this place and time, why do people have burning coals in their lives? Well, they have burning coals because that's what you need to start a fire. And sometimes your fire goes out, and you need to bring burning coals from somebody else's fire to your own. And how do you carry those burning coals? Well, you carry them on your head, because that's how things get carried. Water gets carried on your head. Burning coals get carried on your head. Not just like that, of course, in a pot of some kind. But I think we should be thinking, okay, you're giving them something that is needed for this ongoing life of theirs. This is overcoming evil with good in a transformative way, in a way that reaches out to the person to create relational connection. I was so relieved when I came across that this week because I've never understood that text before. I've thought, yeah, somehow being nice will make somebody feel bad, and then somehow they'll decide to be nice. But it seems like a strange transaction. But the idea of saying, I see that there is no fire in you, so let me give you some of mine, that you might burn brightly too, that you too might join the city on a hill, that you too might be the light that sits on the lampstand, that you too might shine and glow and burn brightly again. So what are we to do? Love one another, love strangers, love enemies, love all as best we can, in the strongest ways possible, and when we act tough, and we will, regroup, recover, and renew our efforts to love again. For as Eugene Peterson says, we will never run out of ways to love. We will never lack for occasions to love. We will never come up short of people to love. Amen.
There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh God, grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I know that we'll be free. I know that we'll be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. In these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we lay our head down to wash their feet. When we see our brother, we'll all be free. We'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free.
We'll be free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free, free. We'll all be free.
We are free, free, we'll all be free. We are free, free, we'll all be free. Oh, let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. We'll all be free. We'll all be free.